We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Antry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. We're back to normal. Tom is back. Did not get swallowed up in a hurricane. And our big thanks to Lee Overstreet for pinch hitting last week, of course. Thank you, Lee.
Yeah. Yep. Thank goodness I wasn't in Alabama, which apparently got the worst of it, from what I hear.
Could have.
Yes, the path. Yes, we so stupid. So mad. I understand the schools have to make a decision before a 3-day holiday.
Yes.
I understand why they did it, but Friday morning, the hurricane is barreling towards us, and I am outside because I think I mentioned on the podcast that me and the boys were outside tearing up our deck.
Okay.
Right. So I've got this pile of broken up deck in my backyard, like 5 feet high, 6 feet wide, and 20 feet another direction. Just shrapnel waiting to go around, taken up by a hurricane.
Yeah, no kidding.
And so Jeez. I spent all Friday, literally all Friday. I was there at 9 a.m. till I don't think I finished until about 6 p.m. Taking all of that, just cleaning up my entire backyard for this hurricane. In the morning, it was barreling towards us. It was going to go straight through the state. It was going to go out into the Gulf. It was going to spin around for a while and then maybe come back and hit us again. Yeah. So I was by the time I was done, they were like, "Yeah, it's going to turn."
Yep. It's the way to. I mean, better that it did. I mean, that's.
Oh, I know.
Still far preferable.
And if we have any listeners from the Bahamas,
right?
Of course, our thoughts and prayers go out to you. I, of course, reached right out to Ephraim as well, one of our listeners who lives in Puerto Rico. He said it didn't even rain.
Well, for once, it's not like they didn't go. If there's a place that's deserving of being spared, I would say it's Puerto Rico.
Really. So, after Maria and everything else, so they're still recovering over there.
No kidding.
Believe me, This is a very stressful time of year for us. So I did all that, and then they canceled school for Tuesday.
Right.
And then my wife decided to work from home, and then little did I know, I also had a son who was sick that day.
Oh, okay.
So had I wanted to do the podcast that day, it wasn't going to happen.
Well,
there was zero chance.
We had prepared beforehand, so it all worked out just fine.
That's right. All right, and this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. There's a bug in here.
That was missed on the video, and I'm not going to... There's no way to go back in time, and I had a question
small,
to AVRant thing
It's a
open.
very small bug. It's like a no-see-em, like a gnat or something. I don't know what's going on. I don't know where these bugs are coming from, but we started having them in our house sometime after the dog moved in, so guess who I'm blaming. But you can email us at question@avrant.com, go to www.avrant.com, and leave us a comment there, facebook.com/avrant podcast, youtube.com/avrant, where you can watch but not comment, because YouTube is a den of
I sneakily gave it a try, leaving it open, and nothing good came of it, so those are gone again. Yep.
Yeah.
No,
I feel so bad that has to be the case.
We have more than enough information coming at us in all the other ways. That's fine.
There's just no reason to open ourselves up to that kind of hate. Nope. Or just negativity in our lives. We've got enough negativity anyways. Everybody else is like, I gotta leave if I don't leave my YouTube comments open, then I won't have the engagement. Blah blah. Like, I don't care.
Yeah, no, we don't have engagement. We do not have a large YouTube audience at all.
That's fine with me.
It's fine.
Hey, I wouldn't watch us. I would listen
to
us.
Yeah. I want to look at us for 2 hours. Yeesh.
I would play us in the background and not look at the screen. It doesn't matter what's on the screen.
You can see the pictures on Flickr now, so there you go. There's not much incentive. Oh, dear.
All right. You want to contact Rob directly, it's rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is @FirstReflect. I'm Tom @avrant.com. My Twitter is @avrant_Tom. Update on the website.
Yes.
So, we're hacked or something.
Okay.
Something's definitely amiss. So, Clint upped our bandwidth by 2 gigs, and in like 4 hours, suddenly we were maxed out again.
Oh, that is, yeah, that's definitely not legitimate AVRant viewers.
Yeah, we've got like, it's ridiculous. He has like 500,000, like on one of his other websites, 500,000 unique views a month. And he's using a quarter of the bandwidth that we're using.
Yeah.
So the plan is we are moving everything off of the server onto a different server, which will happen in the near future. We will rebuild the website, and in fact, if anybody out there wants to donate to the podcast in a way and by, creating us a WordPress site, that isn't all full of whatever the heck it is that this thing is full of, that's using up all our data, that'd be great. Send me the theme and everything, and I'll be happy. I'll tell you, or if you want to contact me, Tom @avrant.com, I'll tell you what are the major plugins that we use. I mean, they're pretty obvious if you know anything about WordPress what we use. I don't use anything magical, nothing custom for sure. If you want to do that, let us know. We're going to be moving to a different way. We're going to redesign the website, and we're going to hopefully get this thing sorted out.
Yes, that would be good.
The biggest problem is that once we move to the new server, I will no longer have access to the AVRant email.
Oh.
So in order to continue to have that,
I see.
I will have to like pay Google to let me do it.
Okay.
Or something. It's not a huge amount, but I said the word Google and now my phone's going. Okay. I got a nick in my windshield, and in Florida they fix it for free. So if they're coming today to do it between 8 and 5 p.m.
Such
8
a
a.m.
window.
and 5 p.m. So I have to keep my phone in here because they're going to text me when they're 30 minutes out. So hopefully it won't happen during the podcast, but
this might end up being a 2-parter.
Could be. Anyways, so I have to have my phone in here for that reason. Now, what was I? Oh yeah, the server. So we've been working on that. We have to figure out how to get the emails. We have to figure out the server situation. We got a couple of things to figure out, and that's in the works with Clint right now, but we are rebuilding everything. We're gonna basically just take the posts that we have and download that and then reset everything else.
Right.
Basically, the server that we're on is only being used for me and my websites. So he's happy to get rid of it. Let me see. In other news, I saw It Chapter 2 in a
theater, because that's not out yet. For home. Yep.
In a Dolby Cinema.
Dolby Cinema. We still don't have any in Canada. I'm waiting for them, but you got.
So I mean, you could see the speakers were freaking everywhere, right? So what we did is I had rented the first one because I saw the first one a long time ago and I kind of fell asleep. I didn't think it was all that scary, so I got the first one on Blu-ray from Redbox, and this friend of my wife's who works with my wife likes horror movies, but his fiance doesn't watch horror movies, and he's got the AMC Pass thing.
Yes.
So
Stubbs
he's
A-list.
Yes, so he can go to whatever. He loves it, and he uses it a lot. So he said, you want to go with me? I'm like, great, yes, I'll go. So I rented the first one. We watched it here, and then we went and watched the second one in the Dolby Cinema. But unfortunately, because we got the tickets so late, the best tickets we could get were essentially in the back left corner.
Okay, yeah,
outside of the height speakers on the
you're
left.
Only getting the overhead lefts, basically. The overhead rights are way over there.
Way far away. And the seats vibrate like crazy, and you can't turn them off.
They got butt kickers. Yeah. Actual butt kicker brand butt kickers is what Dolby Cinemas usually use, so that's probably what it was.
So the sound was great. I mean, the sound was great. From what I couldn't really experience the Atmos like I wanted to, but you could tell that it was going around the room. But on my side of the room, it was very loud. On the other side of the room, not quite as much. So non-optimal seatings, I understand that, but the butt kickers. Oh, Lord help me. I literally took my head. I would sit forward so that my head would not touch the seat because it would vibrate my head so much whenever the bass was. By the way, they had like 8 subwoofers
Yes.
on the ceiling that I could
Yeah.
see. I mean, there was massive amount of bass in there, and these seats are going freaking crazy, shaking me so
Could
hard
you not
I
even
can't hear the
change
dialogue.
the intensity?
No, there
That's
was
weird.
controls for reclining.
Yeah, sure.
And they weren't even that comfortable with seats, I thought. Like my feet kept going to sleep.
I mean, that's weird. Like in the D-Box theaters, you have 3 intensity levels of the D-Box motion, and you can turn it off. You can turn it all the way down to off, which means you paid a whole bunch extra, but, there you go. Oh,
Crap, my call's coming in.
alrighty. Well, while Tom is doing that, I'll go ahead and thank our listeners of the week. These are people who have supported the podcast in some way, sometimes financially. And hey, we do have people who supported us with one-time donations via PayPal this week. If you come to our website, avrant.com, over on the right-hand side, it says support AVRant with our picture of a cup of coffee there. And Tom, Paul, and Stefan all sent in PayPal donations over last week and this week. So thank you very much, Tom, Paul, and Stefan, for those donations. And then people can also support us financially on Patreon if they so choose. If you do so there, it's an automatic monthly donation. You sign up and you say the amount. $1 is the minimum, and there is no maximum. As many zeros as you want to put in is fine. And every single month, they will automatically take that amount of money and give it to us. So we have 87 patrons over there. And thank you very much to all 87 patrons, including Josh V. and Bastian from Germany and Justin B., who are 3 gentlemen who let us know that they are Patreon supporters. I believe Justin B. Said he was brand new and put us up to 87 patrons, so we appreciate that. And then people also support us in ways that are non-financial. 2A offered to give us some additional help with sorting out the website bandwidth issues. He helped us out previously, and things were working well for a few months, but then it started happening again, so happy to see that support. Thank you, 2A. And Tom K. also mentioned us to SVS when he bought a PC 13 Ultra cylinder sub, and we had encouraged him to get a higher output subwoofer to match his room size. And now he says, thanks for that advice, because it's awesome. So yes, congrats, Tom, on that PC-13 Ultra purchase, and I'm happy that you're happy with it. Thanks very much to all our supporters. So Tom is still away on the phone. I'll roll right on into the news, because why not? First news story comes to us from Carlton B. I'm excited about this one. JVC has announced that they'll be releasing a free update for their 4K DILA projectors. That would be like the NX5, NX7, and NX9, or over in the professional series, it's the RS1000, RS2000, and RS3000. Those are the models affected. They'll be adding frame-by-frame analysis and adjustment for HDR10 content. They're calling it Frame Adapt HDR. That's the trademark name they've gone ahead and given to that. And it should be available as a free firmware download sometime in October. They said they'll be demonstrating it at CEDIA, which is happening really, really soon. I think it might be next week. Anyway, that's coming up really, really soon. They'll be addressing it. And that very same firmware update will also add the option to leave an anamorphic lens in place at all times. So even if you're watching 16:9 content, what it'll do is, let's see, how will that work? It'll actually squeeze it so that if you were just putting up the projected image without a separate anamorphic lens, there would be black bars on the left and right, and everyone would look tall and skinny. But then, of course, with the anamorphic lens in place, everyone will look correct. They'll look normal height and normal width. There will be black bars on the left and right, and it'll appear as 16:9 on your CinemaScope screen. So some interesting updates, all happening for free. That's awesome that those 4K JVC projectors are getting that. But I have said for a while that what I want displays to do is just ignore the metadata in HDR content and just analyze it frame by frame. LG was kind of the first to do it with their OLEDs, and now almost everybody is doing it on their flat panels, and this is the first time I've seen a projector announce that they'll be doing this frame-by-frame analysis for HDR10, so that is great. They even said that it would ignore the metadata and just look at every frame, what is the brightest pixel in that frame, and tone map accordingly, so that is awesome. I'm happy to see that. In other display news, TCL announced something they're calling Smart Screen, and back in April, Samsung had something that they called the Sero So the claim to fame of this particular thing is that you can mount it on the wall and then rotate it so that it's vertical. Yup, TCL is bringing out a vertically oriented television. It does rotate. You can have it be horizontal as normal, 16:9, but then you can rotate it for vertical video. And once again, they're claiming that it's because of those millennials. You know, those millennials who've grown up with vertical video. They need their TVs to be vertical too now, apparently. Yeah, having a bit of fun with that. If Tom were here, we could share a laugh over it, but he's busy with other things right now. So I'll just keep on rolling and let everybody know that it was a bit of an unusual year at IFA Expo. That's happening over in Berlin in Germany. Just took place this past weekend. So there were really no major new TV or projector announcements, and typically there are, but pretty much everything that was shown there was already shown or announced at CES way back in January. So projectors appear to be on basically a 2-year cycle at this point. There was nothing particularly new or new models announced. Models that came out at the end of last year are just carrying through on into 2020. So nothing too much to mention there from IFA on the consumer side, but on the professional side, Panasonic did unveil something they're calling their MegaCon. Stands for mega contrast. But yes, MegaCon is their 55-inch mastering monitor. And it uses their dual layer LCD technology. So there's a 1080p black and white, they call it light modulating cell layer. It's just a black and white LCD layer that's in behind a full color 2160p LCD panel, and that essentially creates a little over 2 million dimming zones. You can think of it that way. So you've got this very bright backlight in behind this black and white 1080p LCD layer that just is used to modulate the light, and then a 4K panel full color in front of that. So 55 inches means it's pretty much the largest mastering monitor that you can get. The 30 inchers are typical from Sony. They had their OLED, professional OLED, RGB OLED mastering monitor in 30 inches, and now they have a 30-inch dual layer LCD mastering monitor, and then the Dolby Pulsars are 42 inches, something along that size. But yeah, 55 inches means a larger size now, something that can be more easily shared in a mastering studio with an audience. They say it can do 1,000 nits full field. So it's not just individual teeny tiny little pixels. It's the entire screen, can light up bright 1,000 nits over the entire screen. Delivers 99% of DCI-P3 color and 1,000,000:1 contrast. And the price is estimated to be $50,000. So $50,000 for 55-incher. This is not a consumer model, but interesting to see this dual layer LCD technology continuing to advance and larger mastering monitors being introduced. And lastly, out of IFA, Panasonic had a transparent OLED prototype on display. These have been on display before, transparent OLEDs, but now they've taken another step where they've added an LCD shutter layer in behind it, so you can choose whether the display is transparent or opaque. So you can have something playing, the video playing, and you put your hand behind the screen and you can see your hand right there behind the screen while video is playing on top of it, or you can activate the LCD shutter layer so that you get actual blacks and it's now an opaque screen. So interesting prototype technology. Not sure when that will be coming to market in any thing that anybody can buy even for professional purposes. But yeah, transparent displays like we've seen on TV, sci-fi for a while. Actually a real thing now. So I'll move on over to comments. Joseph H. on Twitter, he continues to enjoy finding ridiculously expensive cables and wires that just has a bit of a laugh at those on Twitter. But now he might have found his new bit of cable nonsense that he thinks is his favorite. There's a company called Moro Audio, and they offer a cable break-in service. It's a drop-down menu. You can select 3, 5, 10, or 20 days of cable break-in. The prices range from $29 to $99. So $29 for 3 days of break-in, $99 for 20 days of break-in. And such a deal, it applies to your entire shopping cart. So load up on cables and have them break them in for 20 days. It's only $99 for all the cables. They say what they'll do is hook all of your Moro 8 audio cables in series, so end to end. Just hook them up end to end to something they're calling a Fry Daddy professional cable burn-in generator. I'm not going to go through everything that's said on the website. Go there. We'll have the link at avrant.com. The copy for it is hilarious. So Tom is back. I'm on the last comment here, Tom. Robert G from Twitter, if you want to scroll down and catch up. If you're interested in the recently released Spears & Munsell Ultra HD HDR benchmark disc, but you don't already know yourself how to use all of the included test patterns and material, there's no instructions on that disc. It's sort of meant for professionals or semi-professionals who would know how to use all those patterns. But Spears & Munsell on their website, they've now published a series of articles that provide some guidance on how to use that new disc. So a very handy thing. Thank you to Robert G for letting us know about that. And that's a link you can pick up. There you go.
I'd be honest. The professional calibrators use a fraction of what's on
completely.
there.
Yeah. They have a few favorites that they use frequently, and a lot else goes unused.
Yeah. There's so much stuff in there that they don't use. And a lot of it, I think, is sort of legacy stuff, too. Like, how will it handle VHS at, 325 pull down?
Yep.
It does.
Edge cases are definitely included.
All right, so update. I'm not getting a glass repair. I'm getting a glass replacement on my car,
Okay.
but they promised me they weren't going to come before 1. So
All right. We should squeak in there. Question time.
And I believe that I have definitively decided I hate butt kickers.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the
Maybe if you could turn it down to be nice and subtle, but
I don't want it at all. I hate it.
when you got a Dolby Cinema and that many subs, yeah, it really shouldn't be necessary.
I just don't understand, and I so much more enjoyed my own home theater.
Yep.
Like it just reiterated how important. I mean, and people are like, "Oh my god," I'm like, I just don't understand why anybody would go to the theater, even. The amount of inappropriate laughter, and I understand why people do it. It's a psychological thing.
Yes,
they're not doing it on purpose. It's just how they're dealing with fear and stuff. But the amount of times that people were distracting me in that theater, just I was like, I'm so glad I didn't pay for this. All right, let's get into these questions here as I sweat because I had to go outside. We're in the stupid heat wave in Florida right now, so because all the cool air got taken someplace else. All right, Rob. Who wrote about the printed acoustic panel guide that we mentioned so often.
Yeah.
Oh, who wrote the printed. Oh, by the way, I looked up those graphics that guy had over that stuff.
From Ghana.
You can get those on eBay. They're about $250 a pop, and they only come in that size. It's
okay.
It's a very large, like 64 by 64 inch size.
It's a flour sack, right? They painted
it
on a
basically.
flour sack,
Yeah, so it only comes in the one size,
Oh, okay.
and there's all kind of different stuff with it. They are so cool.
They are cool.
I would love to have them in my home theater. I just can't see my wife letting me have those things in here because a lot of them are weird. All right, Rob W, who wrote the acoustic panel guide we so often mention. His room is about 25 by 20 by 9, around 4,500 cubic feet. He's got a pool table taking up the back of the room, so he's sitting a little over 8 feet away from his flat panel TV. He tried a projection setup at one point, but he wanted more pop from HDR. And with his white walls and often wanting to have some ambient light on, particularly at the back of his room, a flat panel just wound up being the better solution. His 65-inch TCL R615 was very affordable, but he'd like a screen size increase. Welcome to the wonderful world of Vizio. On the audio side, he's using a Marantz SR6011 to power 5 Aperion Intimus speakers, plus monoprice caliber in-ceiling Atmos speakers and in-wall surround backs. His subs are an SVS PB12 NSD in the right front corner, a PC2000 in the rear left. He also has printed panels on his side walls and some plain panels behind his front speakers on the front wall. And then we do remember that. The ambient light from the back of the room is coming from the pool table. Which
Most
makes
likely,
total sense.
Yeah,
which makes total sense.
He's got can lights up there too, so perhaps those are independently controllable. But yeah, no, it would totally make sense that the back of this room is probably lit up. Yep.
So the bass is nice and even. He even mentions how the opening of Edge of Tomorrow is a fantastic bass demonstration, and his dual SVS subs can shake his neighbor's house when he plays it. So even in 4,500 cubic feet, they seem to be up to the task. And by the way, both of the It movies are just full of low rumbling
That is true.
bass. It is insane. You really notice it when every time the bass hits, they shake your chair.
Yep.
That's when you really notice it. You're at some point during the movie, you get irritated that there's so much bass in this damn movie because your chair won't stop shaking. Said somebody once.
Mm-hmm.
He has no dialogue issues, and everything sounds clear and satisfying as preferred listening level at about -15 dB on the master volume tile. So naturally, he wants an upgrade because he wants to recapture his initial feeling from when he first installed his theater and was blown away. Now he's just very content. But he wants to be wowed again. And don't tell him to just enjoy what he has because he's got his mind made up with a knowing wink. So he's got about $5,000 total that he could put towards new gear right now. But that would be for both the larger TV and any audio upgrades. So what do we recommend? I recommend you spend all of it on the TV.
I mean, you certainly could. I mean, the thing is, $5,000 could get you a 77-inch OLED these days.
Yeah. And that would be...
Which,
yeah,
there's a wow factor to a 77-inch OLED. There's no question about it. You could also definitely afford an 85-inch LCD. My favorite in terms of what I consider the best mix of performance and value is actually going back one model year, but you can certainly still get them for about $3,500 Sony's X900F in the 85-inch size. Full array local dimming, Dolby Vision television, 85 inches for $3,500. Pretty tough to beat. And you're sitting far enough away that an 85-inch screen would give you like a 43, 44 degree field of view, which is pretty darn nice. But of course, that wouldn't leave you a lot of money for an audio upgrade. Like, considering what you already have, I wouldn't really say you're getting much of anything for the remaining $1,500. That would be a big upgrade.
To upgrade the speakers, I mean, you could upgrade like the front three.
Yeah.
I suppose. But I don't know that you would have much left for a TV to get better speakers than what you have up
right.
right
I mean,
now.
if you went with the 77-inch OLED, all your money's gone just on that. But you would notice not just the size increase, but also the picture quality increase of an OLED over the TCL, as good as the TCL is.
Here's my suggestion. My suggestion is $3,500 for whatever that TV was that Rob just mentioned.
So X900F
and then I would
Sony, 85
spend the other $1,500 on home automation.
Mm-hmm.
Screen curtains that open and close over your flat panel that's mounted to the wall or whatever. Curtains that come down, or blinds that come down on your windows, lights that automatically dim. Getting a DVD or like some sort of like USB drive thing plugged into your receiver so that when you power up, it always goes to that first, and then up comes your own title logo for your screen and stuff like that.
Yeah, actually, honestly, if you're not already making your own movie server, backing up your own discs, that's an NVIDIA Shield and some kind of large storage. Not a tremendous investment, but that can deliver a fun wow factor to your theater experience if you're not already using that.
And you're not going to like this, but you can stick with what you have and make some new friends. Okay,
or just turn the volume up higher, because it's amazing how much that wows you.
Inviting people over and having them be impressed with your home theater it gives you that, you get like a residual overflow excitement that they're having.
Right.
So I would, just get some new people in there who will get excited by it, and then remember how cool it is.
Yeah, because it's tough to say. He said himself his existing subs can already basically shake his neighbor's house if he wants to. So it's pretty tough to say you need an upgrade. Now the Aperion Intimus speakers, is it possible to upgrade beyond those? Yeah, but they're good speakers, which means to upgrade beyond them is a pretty penny. I
would be expecting to pay in the range of somewhere between $750 and $1,000 per speaker.
Oh, I could see $1,500 easily per speaker as a possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To upgrade for a serious upgrade, if you want
Yeah.
a serious upgrade.
Because I mean, I could point you to, if you go over to Ascend Sierra RAL speakers, that could be something.
Sure.
But those are $1,350 each.
Yeah.
I could maybe point you like Kef's R series. I would consider that an
Sure.
upgrade over the Imperial Intimus, but they're about
You could go to the RBH,
$1,200 each. Yep.
Just pick the price point you think you could.
Signature series or signature reference, again, $1,000 to $1,500 each speaker. So that's the type of range we would probably have you looking at. Call it $1,000 to $1,500 per speaker. Which
that's $5,000 up front right there. Just when you think about the center channel. So you're talking, the center channel, which is going to be more expensive. They always are, and the two side speakers at $1,500 pop, $2,000 for the center.
Right.
That's $5,000 right there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we're basically saying we could get you either or, right? We can get you a really impressive video upgrade or an impressive front 3 speaker upgrade, but probably not both for $5,000. I mean,
honestly, dude, I mean, if you want anybody other than you to be impressed by it, get the TV.
Oh yeah. Everybody will notice the size and picture upgrade of the TV.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, we're sitting there in the Dolby Theater, right? And it pops up, and they're trying to show you why it is that that's like this little advertisement for Dolby Atmos, the Dolby Atmos Theater, right?
Yeah.
And they're like better black levels. I'm like, that's not what HDR is about.
Well, a little bit.
Yeah, not much.
It's the intra-scene contrast is what it's about. The very deep black right next to a brighter white than you've ever seen before.
Their little intro thing is like, this is their blacks, and it's kind of grayed out, and this is our blacks, and it's black. I'm like, that's just... It's just not. That's not what's the most impressive thing about HDR. It's just hard to talk about. All right. So in the meantime, he wants to know if there's something you can do with this TCL R615 and Harmony Hub remote, because the one thing the Harmony doesn't seem to be able to do is turn on the TCL TV. Once the TV is on, the Harmony controls everything just fine, and it can power it off no problem, but it won't turn it on, which is, of course, annoying. So any ideas?
I mean, that's a bit weird because he did say it's the 615, which is the version they sell at Best Buy, which is the one that comes with the infrared remote. The 617 uses a Bluetooth remote, and I could see that potentially being an issue. But the 615, it should work. So I have two thoughts. On this because one, if he put in the exact model number into his Harmony Hub,
right,
I'm not sure if maybe for some reason the turn on command in both the 615 and the 617 is actually Bluetooth instead of infrared. So if you were to just add the R617 as a device in your Harmony and see if the turn on command for the 617 works. Because if it is Bluetooth, the Harmony Hub can send out Bluetooth.
Right.
But it might require that you say you have an R617. So, I mean, give it a try, because that's fairly easy to just add that as another device and see if that works.
Yeah, it really seems like it's some sort of wrong code going out. Because if it's controlling everything else correctly, and this thing has an IR in the front of it, and you're not having to struggle to change channels or anything with it, then it's not sending out the correct code.
Seems like.
So,
yeah.
I mean...
But
Harmony
on the off chance that
TCL support.
on the off chance that it only goes via Bluetooth, give it, like, don't even take away the R615 right now. Just add a 617 as a new device and just see if the turn on command works for that. Because if it does, there you go. That's a way you can add it. The other one is you could activate HDMI-CEC. I'm loath to do it. Because that is almost certainly going to cause other problems with your Harmony activities.
Just open Pandora's box.
Yeah.
There could be something fun in there. You don't know. But it could be something interesting.
It should be able to function, because with your AV receiver, your SR6011, you should be able to send the command to turn my TV on when I turn on my SR6011. But then HDMI-CEC is active, and who knows what might happen after that. All
right. Josh, long time, first time, he says. Oh, I feel like I'm on the radio. And he just became a Patreon supporter, so thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Josh has a poured concrete room where he'd like to set up his home theater. Being poured concrete is good for sound isolation, but also means he cannot run wires above his ceiling or below his floor. there's poured concrete on the ceiling too.
Yeah, I think it's a poured concrete
Like
shell. Yeah, it could be apartment. That would make sense, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
He says it's a fully poured concrete room. He said can't run wires above his ceiling or below his floor.
For that reason, I'd like to know if we think Sonos' home theater options are a good starting point or a waste of money. I'll take B. Having it all be wireless and only needing a single optical audio connection between his TV and sound system is very attractive to him. What are our thoughts? You have called the wrong podcast.
I mean, you can't...
There is definitely somebody out there that will tell you that this is a fantastic idea and a fantastic solution. What we're going to tell you is how much is your time worth? Mm-hmm. Okay? Because it's going to take you, in order for you to figure this out, how to do it, and just wrap your head around it, it's going to take you a couple hours worth of just reading and research and listening to us and stuff like that. I mean, if we sat down and had lunch with you, by the end of it, you would feel confident and energized to go out and do this yourself without needing Sonos to do it for you and to give you subpar audio because you can't get lossless audio through all this stuff, right? So...
Yeah,
there are definitely podcasts and other people who will tell you that this is a fantastic solution for those who don't want to put the effort in. We are of the mind that everybody should put the effort in because it gives you the best results. So, yes, okay, I hear you. You can't go up your wall or across your ceiling or across or under your floor. But there's still lots of places to put wires in your house where they're not visible. Crown molding. Okay.
The curtain skirt from a couple of weeks ago, we loved that idea of having
just put a curtain skirt around the entire bottom of your
skirt around the bottom, and there you go. Your wires are magically hidden with a very little effort.
Love if you're good with caulk and you have a finishing hammer, gun, whatever thing for molding, you can pull your molding up and hide everything behind there. You can just tuck it between the molding and your carpet. It takes a little bit of effort on your part, but it's totally doable.
Flat wire. Sewell's ghost wire can be an option. If you need to go along the ceiling, you can ghost wire it there. And then if you want to make it completely invisible, you can lightly plaster over it and paint it. And now it is truly invisible if you use ghost wire. And
all of these solutions that involve the ceiling or the floor and running it along there, you can punch a hole in your wall and then punch a hole where the speaker is going to be and install either just a very simple little round hole outlet thingy to let the wire through and get some wall fish tape thing, whatever they call that thing, and just fish the wire through, which is not as hard as it sounds because I've done it and I am fairly incompetent when it comes to these things. It's really not that hard. It really isn't. And if aesthetics are extremely important to you, this is a job that a handyman can knock out for you in a day for a couple $100, more than likely.
Yeah, the other thing is I really can't call Sonos' home theater solution a starting point because if you want to change to something else, it's the whole thing. You have to get rid of all of it and start from scratch. So to me, like if you say starting point, to me that's something that could be expanded or you change out individual components in the future. This is kind of all or nothing. It's all Sonos or something completely new. You can't
This is the problem that we've historically had with Bose and other solutions. Right. Bose used to have, and I don't know what they have these days, because I think all they sell is sunglasses now. But they used to have that big bass module thing, and all the speakers connected to that with proprietary connections.
Yeah, proprietary plugs. Yeah,
you couldn't get rid of it once you had that. That's what you had, and if you wanted to change a piece out, you couldn't. If you had one speaker break, you had to buy another Bose, or you had to change out the entire thing. And whenever we would recommend, and this is going back, half a dozen years, a home theater in a box, we would always recommend one that was modular, one that you didn't have proprietary connections, ones that if your receiver broke or if your speakers broke or if you wanted to upgrade the subwoofer or you wanted to upgrade a piece, you could.
Yes, and the subwoofer is a huge part of this because, Sonos does have their wireless quote-unquote subwoofer, but that is not anything that Tom or I would consider an actual subwoofer. It's a little bass module, and you can only have one of them, and that to me is a huge compromise if you're sticking in the Sonos. What I I would really mention to you, though, is something I mentioned last week, which is that Yamaha's newest lineup of AV receivers allows you to have your left and right surround speakers, only the left and right side surround speakers, but those can be their own MusicCast wireless speakers. So if your main concern is how am I going to get wired to my surround speakers, and you're okay with wiring up your front three, your AV receiver lives up at the front of the room with your TV, and you wire up your front three speakers as normal, but you really want wireless surrounds, getting one of the new Yamaha AV receivers and using Yamaha's MusicCast wireless speakers as your surrounds, that's a fantastic solution that now lets you use a traditional pair of subwoofers and some great speakers up front. And it is a starting point because you can expand and change in the future component at a time. So that's where I would probably point you.
Yeah. So the real problem I have with this entire thing, like I said, is the module is not being able to switch things out.
That's right. And
really, Sonos to me is a good thing to sell if you are a seller, because it's for people who don't want to, who aren't feeling confident about it and don't feel like they can do the research. And honestly, dude, this is home theater is easy. It really isn't that hard. It sometimes looks daunting and all the terminology.
There are a lot of facets. We've been doing this podcast for many years and haven't run out of content yet.
Well, I mean, any hobby, pick a hobby, play D&D, play Magic the Gathering, get into, street drifting or something like that, swim competitively. As you go into that hobby, you're going to feel like you're an outsider because of all the acronyms and the things like that. I went to see a baseball game with my son, and there was there's stupid bugs still in here. There was the billboard or the board up there had a bunch of abbreviations with numbers underneath them, and my son's like, "What does that one mean?" I'm like, I don't have a clue. I don't know what that means. I don't watch baseball. I don't know what those numbers are. I mean, I know what strikes and outs and balls and stuff. I know that, but in whatever ERAs and stuff like that, like the general stuff. But all the rest of those numbers, I don't know what those are. That's a barrier to that I need to get past in order to feel like an insider when it comes to baseball and that sort of thing. And that's the same thing with home theater. It's just going to take a little time and a little mental energy to get there, and then you're going to see it's really not that hard. It really isn't. Rob and I are, not exactly super geniuses over here, though. Rob definitely plays well on TV, so we could do this just fine. So you'll be able to do it too, and we'll help you through it. Just let us know. Ted on Twitter, if we're talking about sound reproduction, and someone says dynamics, what does that mean to us? Is it the ability to play both quietly and loudly without distortion? To me, dynamics is the ability to change between loud and soft with in a way that's easy to hear, or it's very well delineated without overlap. There's without with us being able to differentiate between the two and not be confused or maybe having smearing. And by smearing, I mean the notes are still going on with another note is coming up, and it shouldn't be. So to me, that is dynamics.
Yeah, I mean, I would further define what Tom just described as delineation.
Sure.
Dynamics to me really is just the difference between quiet and loud. So noise floor comes into that a little bit. Distortion does come into that. In fact, oddly enough, high distortion at high output levels can make things sound louder to our brain, even though the actual SPL might be whatever it's measured at. If there's distortion involved, our brain will interpret that as having been louder than the raw sound pressure level. But I think where Ted might be coming from, I mean, I'm inferring this entirely. It was just a tweet. But sometimes people talk about, I got more sensitive speakers and everything sounds more dynamic. And I'm like, the problem with using that type of description is that so many people, they do get more sensitive speakers. They go from normal speakers to clips or something, but they don't recalibrate their system, and they're used to their master volume dial being set somewhere, and they leave it there, and they're like, it's more dynamic. But I'm like, no, it's just louder.
It's just louder. Just straight up
Which,
louder.
I mean, I guess now your loudest thing versus your quietest thing is a greater range now that your loudest thing is louder than it ever was before.
But your other speakers might have been able to do that if you had turned them up.
If you had turned the volume up, exactly.
There's that.
Yeah.
I agree with Rob on that. too often because there isn't very specific definition. I'm sure there are very specific definitions of these things. They're just not well documented and well adopted by everybody in the industry. So I think if you sat down a room full of professionals and said what are dynamics, they could hammer out a definition that everybody would agree on in a couple of minutes. It would not be hard. But when somebody else uses the word dynamics, it doesn't necessarily mean the same.
Well, it's also
thing,
like when people have said, "Oh, DTS sounds more dynamic than Dolby Digital." I'm like, yeah, because the bass is 10 decibels louder. It's just louder. That's what it is.
I think people often use dynamics to mean engaging, or how much fun they had while they. Wow, that was really dynamic.
Yeah, it's like when you hear the term dynamism, right? Like, what does that mean?
I never heard that word before, so there we go. Dave has a Panasonic AX200U projector, which is a model from nearly 12 years ago, so it's definitely HDR. It needs a new lamp, and he isn't ready to purchase a whole new projector yet. Looking around online for replacement lamps, prices are all over the place, and some of them seem sketchy. While those seem overpriced, can we recommend a good place for buying replacement lamp, the replacement lamp he needs? Can we say which ones to stay away from? I can't say which ones to stay away from because it's very hard, but the one that what's his name used to send us to all the time.
Yeah, Ray Coronado used to recommend
the lamp genie place.
Yeah, projector lamp genie. Yeah,
they'll have the OEM version, which will be one price,
the actual branded one.
The actual branded one, they'll have usually not always. Usually they'll have that one. They'll have a second one, which is sort of the not OEM branded one, but it is the approved replacement version.
Sure.
And then they'll have their version of it, and those prices will be descending as you go down. So you can look at all those. I have bought lamps off of eBay before, and they've worked just fine.
Sure.
But you have to be careful. A lot of times you have to read the print very carefully, because sometimes they're selling the lamp and the housing and everything. It's just basically pull everything out and then put this new thing in. And sometimes they are literally just selling the lamp,
just the raw bulb.
If they're selling just the lamp, you have a little bit of research ahead of you to figure out how easy it is to replace. And for the love of God, don't touch the lamp.
Yes.
Okay. Do not touch it with your fingers. You will get oil on it.
Yep.
And that oil will create a hot spot,
yep,
which will destroy that lamp.
No matter how clean you think your fingers are, it doesn't matter.
The oil is on there. So you'll want to touch it with, if you've got white gloves, like cloth gloves, you'll use those. If not, get a rag or a clean rag or a clean paper towel and use that.
Just invest in some brand new white cotton gloves. That's what you want. But yeah, so I mean, I took a peek. Projector Lamp Genie does offer a replacement for the AX200, but it's an old enough model now that they don't have a selection. They basically just have the Philips OEM version of it, which is probably exactly what Panasonic would sell at an even higher price under their own Panasonic name, but they don't have the less expensive version. So this was like a $240 or something one. I'm like, that's probably well more than he wants to pay for a 12-year-old projector lamp. So Projector Central has a list of a whole bunch of replacement lamp retailers that they recommend.
Okay.
Lamp suppliers. Not all of them will have a wide selection for every possible projector, but if you go through their list of recommended suppliers, you'll find at least one that does. So in this case, Pure Land seemed to have the best one. They had for about $160 a Philips OEM one. So it's not Panasonic branded, but it is the original lamp manufacturer. And I would feel very confident with that. The ones to stay away from are the ones where you can't find out who the OEM is. That means it's some Chinese knockoff, which honestly might function just fine for who knows how long, but it also might fail on you within like 3 weeks. So you're really rolling the dice there. Whereas if you get the official OEM one, you're pretty safe, and that's a pretty reasonable price. So yeah, the lamp suppliers from Projector Central is a good resource.
Yeah. All right, Chris. Chris wants a new receiver for his 10 by 11 foot bedroom setup, in which he's using 5 Mica speakers and an SVS SB1000 sub. His front runner is the Denon X1500H from Accessories for Less. He wants to keep the price under $300, and the physically smaller size of the X1500H would be helpful to him, although the slightly deeper X2400H could also fit. Mm-hmm. The 1500H is rated at 80 watts. He's sitting like inches from these speakers.
Inches, like quite literally inches. That's not an exaggeration.
Are we going to talk about watts?
Well, he's asking.
So the 1500 is rated at 80 watts, and the other one is rated at 95 watts. Is that of any value of importance? Absolutely not.
Not in your case. In your case, no.
Case,
I mean, in almost any case, no. Although, well, I don't know. It's the power supply that we care about less than the rated watts.
Yeah,
and the X2400, the 2000 series does have an upgraded power supply. That's part of the reason for the larger case. So it is a not super impressive power supply inside of the X1500. However, you are sitting so close to your speakers that like a quarter of a watt will do ya. So this in your case of no importance.
Of zero importance, yes. So he has noted that the 1500H does not convert analog video inputs to HDMI. That's not uncommon at this price point. And it doesn't handle component video. But he doesn't need those features, and the X1500H has enough HDMI inputs for his setup. Is there any other reason to choose the slightly larger and more expensive 2400H? I mean, no.
Yeah, it's got dual HDMI outputs. He doesn't need those.
He doesn't need any of this stuff. He's in a bedroom setup.
Yeah.
He's got itty-bitty speakers that he sits extremely close to. It's got all the HDMI inputs he needs. He's not upgrading for... And I wouldn't even suggest this for better room correction because he's not going to be able to do a lot in this room. It's a bedroom.
They both have the same. They have Multi-Q XT, which is pretty darn good at that price point. Really,
at this price point, it's insane.
I'm pretty sure there was a Zone 2 feature that the 2400 that the 1500 doesn't have, but he didn't mention nothing about Zone 2.
For what he needs.
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of that you should care about in this receiver is, does it have the right number of inputs? Does it have the room correction I'm comfortable with? And does it have any sort of additional features that matter to me? Like, do you care about AirPlay or Bluetooth or music cast or something like that?
It has all those things. It's got HEOS built in and everything. It's got Wi-Fi built in.
So, I mean, if there was one that if they all have all those things that you care about, then go for the cheapest one.
Yeah. No,
and
honestly,
the cheapest one's the 1500.
Where I might be steering you slightly different is if you had come to me and said you wanted one of the S series models, the S790 or something like that, because the difference between the Denon S series models and the X series models is the version of Odyssey. The S series models get Mult-EQ, and the X series models get Mult-EQ XT. And given that at Accessories for Less, it's like a $20 or $30 price difference, I would tell you to get the X series every time, just for that. But for what you're talking about, I think the X1500H is probably the perfect choice.
Yeah. So is there any other receiver we would recommend more highly to him, either a different brand or a different Denon model? He already uses the Denon X3400H in his living room and likes it very much. I see no reason for you to steer you anywhere else.
No, I think you've hit it just right there, Chris.
The only thing I would do, this is literally the only thing I would do, if I cared enough, which I wouldn't, but if I cared enough, I might go to my local Best Buy or whatever place and look at their open box section.
Right.
Just to see if on the off chance you walk in there and there's a receiver that, fits all your parameters and just happens to be a couple dollars less and you can pick it up right away. That's quite literally the only thing I would do. But for you, I think that's a perfect receiver.
Yep.
So you're good.
Yep.
Mark, even though we all have different room sizes, if we all use Odyssey auto setup and then we all select the same master volume level, would we all be hearing the same decibel level? If we used Odyssey and all of our speakers were able to play as loud as they were supposed to at the main listening, so let's say they all had enough power.
Yeah.
They all got loud. They all got to the reference volume at your listening seat. And we turned all the volume dials to the same thing, would we be hearing the same decimal level? And the answer should be yes.
It should be yes. The one caveat to that would be that with different reverberation times in our rooms, we might perceive it. So the direct sound measured in pure sound pressure level would be the same. There might be some very small different unit-to-unit tolerance differences, but very small differences should be the same. But because our rooms might ring for different amounts of times, we might perceive one of our rooms as being louder than another.
Right.
That would be the only...
and you could experience this in your own room. You could calibrate, and then I mean, it would be almost impossible to do this, but you could calibrate and then with all your room treatments and everything up,
right,
and listen, and then take everything out, like literally everything except for the speakers, the couch, the carpet, everything, and then recalibrate, and then listen. You would say, this sounds louder to me,
right,
and it's because of all the echoing around the room. It's just the reverberation. And you've experienced that, I'm sure, as you've been, like, I know that I have, in some restaurants.
Yep.
You're in there, and everything's very loud.
Yeah.
Because there's hard surface everywhere. And then you go to another restaurant where they have room treatments up all over the place. You're like, wow, I can actually understand you, and we're just talking at a normal level. Yeah. So how loud do we tend to listen on our master volume? He's asking us, you and I.
Yeah.
And we've discussed this before, but it's all related to content.
Yeah, because there is an industry standard, but that doesn't mean that everybody follows it.
Yeah. So, and not only that, I mean, like your app on your YouTube app on your Xbox, it may sort of give you the audio different than the app on your Blu-ray player or your TV or whatever. So, generally speaking, for Blu-rays and Ultra HD Blu-rays, I listen between -10 and -5.
Okay.
That's generally where I fall.
Yep.
I'll sometimes go as low as -15. And sometimes I've, like Thor Ragnarok, you'll find me turning it up to reference in a little bit higher. Sometimes
but we know that one was mastered strangely with very little dynamic range and a quieter mix overall. So I'm pretty much in the same ballpark. I seem to mostly land at about -12 for physical discs. I'm typically about -12. I'm in a tiny room, and I'm in an apartment, so I don't want to crank it too loud, but that tends to be where I land.
So for Xbox content or Hulu, I tend to be around -12, -15. On Netflix, I tend to be around -20, and on YouTube, I tend to be around -30. So that seems to be...
Yeah, it depends on how it was mastered.
But I also don't care that much, too.
Yeah.
Hulu, it tends to be a show I'm more engaged with, and Netflix is the same. So those two, for me, are more equivalent. But, when I watch YouTube, I'm usually just watching some climbing competition or whatever. I just want to be able to hear what people are saying. I don't really care that there's the bases
about the
properly
utmost
mixed
fidelity. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So does having your room treated versus untreated affect what master volume level someone would use? What about using more efficient speakers? Would that change where you would set the master volume dial? The answer is no. But yes. Okay. So like we just said, in a very reverberant room that doesn't have the proper amount of absorption, you may find yourself turning it lower, just trying to cut down on the echoes and the reverberation because it sounds
oddly, you
louder.
might be turning it higher, not because you actually want it higher, but just because you can't understand the dialogue very clearly, so you end up turning it louder just to try and make the dialogue intelligible.
And with the more efficient speakers, what ends up happening is your trim levels on your receiver change from speaker to speaker, but your volume level should stay the same.
That's right.
That's
exactly what the trim levels are calibrating, so that the master volume can stay the same.
Yeah. So, if things are being done correctly, and all rooms being equal, changing out the speakers or change the different speakers' efficiencies and stuff like that it all should stay the same. So he says, what peak decibel levels are safe? When he has his master volume set to -11 dB, if he is looking at his SPL meter, see weighted slow response, he will sometimes see peaks as high as 106 dB. He thinks it would be crazy to listen to a whole movie with the volume any higher. What's our take on the loudest we'd ever play a whole movie?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty close, right? Like I said, I typically land at -12, so...
Yeah. The typical, go to a movie theater and like an IMAX in particular.
IMAX,
and they will give you full reference, and so you are probably that's what that experience sounds like.
That is bloody loud,
and it is. You come out, you're like, I am glad that the seats didn't vibrate.
Right.
I'm never gonna let that go. Not in a million years. Butt kicker is. Feel free, Butt Kicker, if you would like to advertise on this podcast, you could have you could advertise. I would say this podcast sponsored by Butt Kicker 100% the time, every time, because I am never going to recommend your products to anybody. Though I have. Every time saying I think they suck.
I think subtly set up, it could be all great. But yeah, no, the 160 dB on your SPL meter, that's almost certainly bass. C weighting is pretty flat right down to about 80 hertz. It rolls off pretty quickly. C weighting does below that, but 80 hertz is definitely still bass. So that loudest sound pressure level is most likely in the bass. The treble is probably never getting up to 106 dB peaks if your master volume set to -11 and the trim levels are actually set correctly.
Right.
But that's why the standards, there are different work bodies that recommend different safety work standards.
It's not about necessarily how loud it is; it's how long you're experiencing.
The duration of it, but they all go by A weighting for safety standards, which is really only 500 to 5,000 hertz. That's really about the only range that A weighting is effectively measuring the true level. So they're not really worried about deep bass being super loud or really high treble, because our ears tend to just not hear those frequencies as well naturally. But I mean, the more conservative work safe guidelines say that you can basically work a whole regular 8-hour shift with about 85 decibels of noise, which is darn loud if that's going all the time. But they don't recommend...
It's 10 dB louder than the test tones coming out of your receiver. Imagine 10 dB louder than that all day long.
Yep, 8 hours, but they don't recommend it any louder than 8 hours. 85 decibels is sort of the threshold at which you could start to create hearing loss if you're in it long enough. So about 8 hours for that. And then the more conservative guys say that for every 3 decibel A-weighted increase over that, you cut the time in half. So up at 100 decibels, it's only safe for 15 minutes. And then those same more conservative guidelines would say that for a very, very brief little, shot, 120 decibels is safe for your hearing. You certainly wouldn't, literally a shot, bang, that's it, 120 decibels. Whereas there are more relaxed standards that start at 90 decibels. Some of them say for every 5 decibel increase, you cut the time in half, and they'll allow for as much as a 140 decibel little shot, which I don't consider safe, because that is literally a gun in your hand being fired without hearing protection.
Yeah.
And I don't consider that
safe. That's a good way to ring your bell, for sure.
Yeah.
I love in the movies when people are like shooting guns in cars, and then afterwards they're like, "Oh, did you see that guy? Yeah, I saw him." No one's talking.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys could talk, but no one's hearing nothing.
That was in the very first season of The Walking Dead. That was good, because he had to fire a gun while inside of a tank.
Oh,
and
God.
He was deaf for like the next episode. I'm like, yeah, you actually got that right.
I know. Yeah.
Whereas later on, they were in an enclosed, concrete cell, and they shot a huge revolver in there, and it was fine within minutes. I'm like, yep, you just lost all reality as you went along in the season. But there you go.
So he asked, do we run our subwoofers hot? No.
I don't.
No. I don't need to.
Yeah. I have PC-13 Ultras in a tiny room. I really don't need to, and an apartment.
Well, so. So running subwoofers hot is about unbalancing the frequency response, basically.
A little bit.
To me, that's what it is. Basically, you're saying, I want there to be more bass in here, and therefore I'm going to increase my subwoofers. If I really wanted that, mostly what I want is not 80 hertz or 90 hertz or 80 hertz or 70 hertz or 60 hertz. I want 30 hertz and down.
Mm-hmm.
I want the deepest bass, the stuff that rumbles me, to be a little bit louder.
But actually, his next question explains why Tom and I don't run our subwoofers hot.
All right. So I would change the EQ curve on Odyssey before I would run my subwoofers hot. So yes, do we use Odyssey Dynamic EQ? And the answer is yes.
Yes, and yes, and that's why we don't run our subwoofers hot, because we use Odyssey Dynamic EQ.
So what Dynamic EQ does, and we've talked about this before, but it bears to be repeated, is as you at reference volume, Dynamic EQ does nothing.
That's correct.
Okay, reference volume, that gives you what you should be able to hear of all the different frequencies all the time. But as we lower the volume down, our hearing is less sensitive at different frequency ranges.
That's right.
So what dynamic EQ goes, oh, you've lowered it by 20 dB. That means that even though you've lowered the treble, which you hear very well, by 20 dB, you're actually hearing the bass much less than that. So we're going to boost the bass a little bit so that perceptually you perceive it to be the same 20 dB decrease in bass.
Yeah, so that everything that is supposed to be audible is still audible. Whereas if you had lowered your master volume by, let's say 20 dB, there are low bass frequencies that have literally become inaudible if they are actually just 20 decibels below reference volume. So it uses curves of equal loudness to boost up what needs to be boosted up just to keep it audible is all.
And way back in the day, I had I went to a presentation given by Odyssey about dynamic EQ before it came out, and they used that whatever curve, that transformation curve thing is. I can't remember.
Fletcher-Munson curve.
Fletcher-Munson curve. But they also brought in audio experts.
That's right. Yeah. They hand-tuned it.
They had them all hand tune it themselves, and then compared all that to the Fletcher-Munson curves and everything else, and came up with their own curve based on that. Yeah. So it is more than just the Fletcher-Munson, whatever it is, Bunster, whatever.
Munson.
So how hot does dynamic EQ make our subwoofers over the rest of our speakers at our typical master volume dial setting at, say, 20 hertz, 40 hertz, and 60 hertz? I don't know. I don't think we know.
I mean, it's a curve. I mean, he's saying our typical, so mine at -12. That would mean that, so it is a curve. So down at 20 hertz, it's probably making it about 12 decibels louder, because the 20 hertz sounds need to be basically right at full reference volume for us to perceive them how we're meant to perceive them. So way down there, it's probably boosting it by just as many decibels below reference volume as I've set my master volume. And then it's a curve along that. So the 40 hertz, an octave above that, I mean, I would just estimate, but it's probably about 9 decibels louder, with my master volume set at -12, up at 60 hertz, another half an octave above that. I don't know, 8 or 7, something like that. So it is a curve.
Yeah. But I don't know that we know exactly what that curve looks like, do we?
Well, I mean, they kind of guard that because it is their hand-tuned curve.
We don't exactly know, but we can kind of guess.
But what we can say is that the lowest bass is being boosted more than every octave above it. It is a curve.
As you go up, it's going to be boosted a little bit less. So yes, do we use a house curve at all? In that we both take out the notch.
Well, I can't. I mean, my receiver's old enough that I don't have that option. I just set mine to the flat Odyssey setting, and I leave it there. But I'm in a very, very small and not insignificantly treated room, and that's exactly where the flat setting makes sense. But that's all I use.
So he says, since Tom kind of feels meh about Atmos, has he ever tried running just the Atmos speakers a bit hot to make them stand out a bit more? Is that a bad idea? It's not a bad idea.
No,
and
not
in
a
fact,
bad idea.
you can set them a bit hot by just turning on the DTS upmixing versus the Dolby upmixing.
That's what I do. I use the DTS upmixer most of the time, primarily because I use front wide speakers, and that's the only upmixer that'll put any sounds into front wides, but it also does run the overhead speakers a bit hot in my case. So I don't, in the trim levels, turn mine up at all. In fact, I would prefer to turn them down when using Neuralex a bit, but then when I switch back to Atmos, I'd want them back at normal reference trim levels. So instead of doing all that manually, I just live with them being a bit goosed in Neuralex.
But is that a bad idea? None of this. I mean, if you want to run your subwoofer hot, if you want to run your surrounds hot, if you want to run something else hot for one reason or another, it's fine. No, you're not. There's no AV police that are going to come to your house.
On your door. That's right.
They're going to do the thing that they do. It's going to be fine. So if you can do all these things. Don't worry about that. Especially if you're just testing it out or whatever. Just remember your settings, I guess. I swear this freaking bug is gonna kill me. So it keeps flying like almost like right near my mouth, and I'm like, I'm not eating a bug on this podcast. It's not happening. Stop bugging me, bug. All right. Lastly, jeez, if Mark wants to try Aura 3D, does he need a set of overhead speakers up in a certain way? He was reading that need to be front heights and rear heights rather than any sort of top speakers. So would changing his overhead speakers to whatever is needed for Aura 3D screw up his Atmos experience? Well, I mean, you could use the same speakers for Atmos and with the same classifications. Yeah, positioning. You just need a voice of God speaker, which they don't have.
I mean, you don't even have to have it. The voice of God speaker is, semi-optional.
I kind of think that if you're going to do Aura 3D, you sort of
want it.
Have to have the voice of God speaker. It's the whole overhead experience in one speaker.
As far as what the overhead speakers are labeled in the AV receiver, they do need to be called. So Aura would have you install front heights and surround heights, but Atmos cannot make use of surround heights. But it can make use of rear heights, and so can Aura 3D. So de facto, what you end up with is front heights and rear heights are a configuration that all three immersive audio formats can use. DTS:X, Atmos, and Aura 3D can all use front heights and rear heights, so that's what you end up wanting to call your 4 overhead speakers. Now, they can be positioned anywhere from a 30-degree elevation angle to a 45-degree elevation angle, and that overlaps where top fronts would go. Ideally, top fronts would go at 45-degree elevation angles. So if you do that, you have not screwed up your Atmos experience at all. You still have forward and rear overhead speakers, and by calling them front heights and rear heights, they're compatible with Aura 3D. Now, I agree with Tom, though, if you're going to do it, you probably want to add that voice of God speaker, which on most Denon AVRant receivers takes up your subwoofer 2 pre-out. That becomes your top surround /
I think we just have to wait a year or two. I mean, if Aura 3D can get enough, it's not ever going to happen, but
no.
Yeah, it's never going to happen. But, okay, so if you think about this, Dolby Atmos is front speakers, front left and right, back left and right, in line with each other, and then all the speakers that go overhead are in line with those speakers. So it's sort of a dual... If you go to a Dolby Atmos theater, you're totally going to see it. There's this line of speakers.
Just a line of speakers along,
Aura 3D, on the other hand, says where your normal speakers are, put those close to the ground, then put another one above it in a height position, and on all your speaker locations, fronts, lefts, rights,
30 degrees up,
centers, center speaker, rear speakers, everything. And then on top of that, also have one speaker on your ceiling, which is directly above your head, above your couch, called the voice of God speaker. That is, so they have a different way of thinking. Honestly, I don't think one's significantly superior or inferior to the other one. It's just that there's not a lot of content for Aura 3D out there. And if they had said at the very beginning, which one would you prefer to win the battle, I would have said Aura 3D, because it's just
their approach
easier
makes sense.
Their approach makes sense, and it's just easier to set up than trying to put multiple speakers across your ceiling. But they don't have nearly the money that Dolby does, so everybody else can go. Go the heck, I guess.
Sit and spin.
Dave, when Sonos announced their partnership with Sonos and Sonance. So when Sonance to offer in-wall and in-ceiling speaker options, they also included an outdoor speaker made by Sonos. It appears to be very weatherproof and quite rugged, but it is a passive speaker with speaker wire inputs that they clearly explain is meant to be powered by the Sonos amp. The amp is not weatherproof, and the amp is what has all of the Sonos stuff in it. So doesn't that defeat the purpose? Is he missing something? Missing that they're trying to make a whole bunch of money? Yeah.
I mean, the Sonos amp is not meant to go outside. It's inside your house. The speaker wires come out. And the Sonance outdoor speakers are an interesting design. You actually sort of feed the speaker wire through the bracket at the back. They come out the front of the speaker and connect in the front, where they're then protected by the weatherproof grill. So as far as the speaker wire goes, it's not exposed to the elements. And then the Sonos amp is living inside your house, and you run the speaker wire outside. So it might be a bit more of an installer thing. That's kind of what they're aiming at there. But I did want to mention, I mean, just this past week, I think it was, Sonos introduced a brand new speaker that they're calling the Sonos Move. It is their first battery-powered and Bluetooth-compatible speaker. And
Amen, brother. That's my favorite outdoor speaker.
So that comes on a little base. I mean, it's basically a Sonos One. As far as the innards of the driver complement, but then it sits on this base where you can charge it, and then it's got a molded handle in the back. It is very weatherproof and very rugged, and you can pick it up and take it with you and use its battery and play it outside. So there you go. That's if you were like, I don't want to wire it up if I'm using it outside, well, now they have the Sonos Move.
My brother-in-law had this conversation with me. I know I've talked about it before, but he was building. He got a pool. He's getting a pool installed. He's got his tiny backyard, but he's got this even tinier pool in there, and like this little pool house, which has got the world's smallest bathroom. But he's got this, and he's like, "Oh, you're the audio guy. What should I do for audio for outside?" I'm like, Bluetooth speaker.
Mm-hmm.
The cost and the complexity. Sorry, stupid bug. The cost and the complexity of, I think everybody should have heard that because I hit my microphone.
Yep.
So I was trying to get the thing out of my face. The cost and the complexity of putting speakers outside, unless it is super easy for you, and you're going to use them all the time, which no one does. No one does. No one uses their outdoor speakers all the time. My parents had outdoor speakers, and it was really easy because they had a bonus room up in their attic, so they had you could walk into their attic from the bonus room. He just basically took a drill and drilled out 2 speaker wire slots and threw the speaker wire through, ran it back into his home theater, which was in the bonus room. It was the world's easiest thing. And they still only used it every once in a while when they were outside swimming or had a pool party or something like that.
The Sonos ones are your traditional outdoor speakers that are meant to be installed on the side of your house under an eave, and they're no different from that. So it's no different than the Yamaha outdoor speakers that we recommend all the time. It's that same type of thing.
And there's quite literally no reason to buy these speakers over other cheaper speakers.
Yeah, because you can hook any outdoor speakers to the Sonos amp, and it's the same end result.
Yeah. And I would recommend you get Yamahas. So there you go. Ian watched a video explaining how digital audio encoding works, including examples of what it sounds like when low bit depths or lower sampling rates are used. This seemed like the best argument he's come across for why sampling rates above 48 kilohertz might be beneficial, as it isn't so much about reproducing frequencies above 20 kilohertz, but rather it's about reproducing sounds below 20 kilohertz more accurately. Some of the graphs and graphics shown make it look as though 48 kilohertz sampling rate could reproduce a 24 kilohertz sound, but not very accurately. So what are our thoughts?
Yeah, so I'll defend this video a bit in that if you listen carefully to the explanation, they're not incorrect. But it's unfortunate that the graphs and the examples that they've shown can be easily misinterpreted. Like, I don't blame Ian's take on this whatsoever, because they essentially establish a pattern but then don't fully explain that the pattern doesn't continue, forever and ever. Because they show they show like what happens if you use 8-bit encoding instead of 16-bit, right? Which all that does is increase the noise floor. That's all it does. The sound is all still there, but because of quantization error, because you just don't have as many bits to allocate, you end up with this obvious noise floor, a bed of noise underneath the sound. And then they show what happens if you only sample at 8 kilohertz or 10 kilohertz, and then move that all the way up to, 44.1 or 48 kilohertz sampling. And again, you get that weird, warble distortion and stuff like that happens when you're trying to sample frequencies that are higher than what the encoder can handle. Right? If you're sampling it only at 8 kilohertz, it can only go accurately up to 4 kilohertz, which is well below the threshold of human hearing, and you can certainly hear the warble errors that happen when you do that. But that pattern doesn't continue forever. And more important than that is the misinterpretation that when you're sampling with digital audio, that what you end up with is a connect the dots graph, because that is not what happens. It is not that more dots mean a smoother line that gets drawn, which is an easy thing to imagine, because whenever they picture these graphs, it looks like, oh, you just connect the dots. That looks like a waveform, but made out of dots, and you play connect the dots, and if you had more dots, you'd have a smoother analog wave. But that's not how digital audio works. That's not how digital to analog conversion works. So where I really want to point everyone is xiph.org. That's xiph.org. Go to their video section. There's only 2 of them, but they explain it properly and correctly, because the samples being taken, you end up with a lollipop graph, not a stair-step graph that looks smoother if you have more dots. No, it's a lollipop graph, and you are not drawing a line between those dots. You are coming up with an equation that would create a line that is created only from adding together sine waves, where we know what the highest possible frequency can be. We've cut that off. There are no frequencies above the Nyquist frequency, which is exactly half of the sampling rate. There are no frequencies above that. You can only add together sine waves, and using those limitations, we create an equation that would go through all the dots. And there is one solution. There are no alternative solutions for that equation. There is one. So digital audio in a digital analog converter is, can you do the math or not?
Right.
Because it is either perfect and going through all of those points, or it is not perfect and you end up with errors. And those are the only two possibilities. So ziff.org, look at their videos. It's much better explained. But I will defend the video Ian sent a little bit because they aren't actually wrong. They just unfortunately didn't clarify that the pattern doesn't continue forever.
All right, Justin. Justin bought a JVC RS500 back when it first came out. It was expensive, but he was excited to get one of the first projector models that said it would support 4K and HDR. Of course, this is one of the models that JVC had to later admit did not handle HDR in Rec 2020 color correctly out of the box. Sorry, first adopters. You got hosed again. So they released suggested settings and tried to compensate, but HDR was never quite right on these models. Some owners have tried to salvage the HDR experience by using HD Fury devices along with a light meter in an external LUT box.
A lookup table box. Yep.
Yeah. Mad VR is about to release a hardware box, the Envy, that looks very promising, but this is expected to cost over $2,000, in which case you could just get an Epson. So at one point, Justin was considering trying all this stuff to salvage his original RS500 experience. He wound up barely using his expensive projector, and now enough time has gone by that, of course, he's considering just selling it and getting a new model. He talked to the guys at AV Science, and they completely understood how unhappy he was. The genuine 4K DILA models cost quite a bit more than he'd like to pay. So Justin got excited when he saw the press release for the JVC LX NZ3. This laser light source 4K resolution on the screen, not wobbled, auto tone mapping, HDR10 and HLG support, and all that for $3,700. What's the catch?
It's DLP. That's the catch.
Yeah.
It is not liquid crystal on silicon, which JVC calls DILA. It's a DLP projector. It is a wobbled 1080p panel. They're just wobbling it 4 times a frame instead of only twice per frame. So your eye does perceive that as true 4K resolution, but it is a wobbled panel. And yeah, so I mean, it's nice that they're using the laser light source. However, nowhere in the specs or the press release do they talk about actually hitting DCI color. And this is the laser light source that uses 2 blue lasers, one of which activates a yellow phosphor. Right. And yeah, I mean, it depends. That can be put through a filter, or you can use one that is using a deep enough shade of blue to actually get you to DCI-P3 color. But it sounds like that is not the version they're using, because most DLP projectors can't hit DCI-P3 color. They're actually lucky to hit Rec 709 color, HD color. They're lucky to hit that. And given that JVC touted nothing about wide color, it makes me highly suspect that they might not even be hitting Rec 709, to be honest. I mean, it's still a nice sounding projector in specs and all that, but those DLP-based projectors that wobble the panel 4 times, they just can't get the deep black levels. Even with a laser light source, yes, they can turn the laser light source completely off for a full black frame, but as soon as there's anything on screen, the entire panel has to light up. You can't locally dim a DLP chip. So yeah, I mean, that's what you're giving up. It wouldn't look like your RS500. I mean, what most people would do with the RS500, if they're not happy with the settings update that JVC put out on their website, what a lot of people have done is just revert to converting everything to standard dynamic range.
Right.
With an Oppo, with an Oppo or a Panasonic, you can convert the HDR to standard dynamic range while keeping the wide color. He didn't
buy this projector to have standard dynamic range.
No, he wanted HDR. Yeah, I completely understand. I mean, most people were disappointed. That's, they're like, I didn't buy this so I could convert everything to SDR. So, I mean, honestly, your options are, I could point you to an Epson 5050. because that is below this price point, and honestly, its black levels and contrast are better than this laser light-driven JVC because of the DLP panel, or it's kind of wait for the prices of the new JVCs to come down.
So Justin wants to purchase something that he says is about the size and weight of a refrigerator that is only made in Australia.
He didn't say what it was. That's just the description he gave.
What should he expect in terms of cost and experience of shipping something that large to the U.S.?
He knows that Tom lived in Australia for a while and had to ship, pretty much all your belongings. So he's just thinking you would have the experience.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, it depends. I mean, when I shipped all my belongings back, it's a completely different thing. Basically, they back a truck up to your house and they fill that container up, and that container goes on the container ship, and that container comes, goes through customs and everything else. So you're talking months.
Right.
I think it took like 2 or 3 months to get our stuff. Amazon orders would, I mean, if I remember correctly, it's just going to be hard to remember. So what would happen most of the time is my parents or somebody would order something for them, to their house. They would pack it up and they ship it to me.
Okay.
And it was weeks.
Yep.
So, weeks, I think, is a pretty accurate way
and
to
not
do
necessarily cheap, right?
None of it was cheap. Yeah, it was more. Yeah, but ordering from Amazon and having it shipped to you was like ridiculous. So, size and shape of a refrigerator. I mean, what I would do is,
it's a big freight item, is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to end up having to put it on the plane. So there's different services that will do that for you. One of the, some of the options you should look into is there are going to be door-to-door services, but if you have the option of pickup at the airport, that can save you some money as well. So you'll have to do a little bit of research on that, but I would expect weeks to get it to you, unless you know somebody who knows somebody. I would be surprised if it was less than weeks.
Yeah. Any notion of what kind of price point he's looking at? Like just round ballpark figure? Are we talking hundreds? Are we talking thousands?
I wouldn't be able to say for sure, but yeah, I would guess at the shipping alone, I mean, depending on who you're getting it from, would be in the hundreds.
Okay.
Perhaps
low thousands.
Going low thousands.
Yeah, for freight. Okay.
That would be my guess. But like I said, I haven't shipped a whole lot of stuff to myself. All right, Damien. Damien says, thanks to Rob and Lee for going through all his questions last week. In his huge open living room, Rob mentioned how Yamaha's newest receivers let you use a pair of wireless MusicCast speakers as your surrounds, and how that might be helpful if he ever wants to expand from his current 2.1 setup to a 5.1 setup. But Damien has decided he's just going to stick with 2.1 in the living room.
Okay.
So now what we recommend to power his sound system and connect everything. He wants to replace his Onkyo 646 he's using now because he really wants to be able to pass through Dolby Vision to his Vizio TV. So which receiver model will let him do that and also have the power to contend with his huge open space? He's willing to consider the HSU HC1 Mark II that Rob mentioned, but at the moment, after getting a chance to hear them in person, he's leaning towards some SVS towers. It looks like they could have the output capabilities after, but they get their
sorry, that should be a THER. It is the wrong there. Sorry.
That's all right. But they get there via the high power handling rather than really high efficiency. So he'll be mating whatever speaker he gets with the PC2000 sub. So which receiver should he get? So this is a large, because I wasn't here for this. So this is a large room, and he's going to get. He's thinking about this SVS towers,
which can handle a lot of power and play loud that way, but
if it's only 2.1, whatever your receiver's rating is into 2 speakers anyways. Yep. So that gives you a very accurate description of how much power they can put out continuously, generally speaking. So how far away is he sitting?
I mean, it looked to be about 13, 14 feet, that type of range.
Right.
Yeah, it's a little tricky because, I mean, the thing is, I might actually point you. So, first of all, if you get any modern Denon or Marantz receiver that's within the past couple of model years, they will pass through Dolby Vision. So that's not a concern at all. But I'm just thinking, like, if you actually went with a Marantz Slimline and then added, a nice 2-channel amplifier to that.
Well, no matter what you go with, I think you should buy the receiver first.
And give it a
plug
try.
everything up and give it a try.
Yeah.
It's very easy for us to say, mathematically, in order to hit full reference volume, you're going to need an external amplifier. But the reality is, you may never want it to be that loud ever.
Yeah. It's just that if you get an AV receiver that does not have pre-outs whatsoever, and if you're talking about the regular models, I mean, you're either getting a Marantz SR, 5012 or 5011 or something like that, which is not inexpensive, or on Denon side, they don't offer pre-outs until you're all the way up to the 3000 series, right? So you're a 3400 or 3500 or something, which granted, they're like $450 at Accessories for Less now, so...
Not exactly breaking the bank.
They wouldn't break the bank, and it would get you XT32. So, I mean, if you can go for an X3400H or a 3500H, that covers all bases. And like Tom says, use it just by itself first. And then if you do decide you need even more watts, it has pre-outs. So that's a pretty easy recommendation. But if you wanted something lower priced, it's a bit tricky because like the Marantz Slimlines, they're 50 watts a channel, and you probably might end up using more than that with SVS towers in this room. But they give you the pre-outs for only the front, left, and right, but that's all you need. But then they're limited to regular multi-Q. They don't have even XT, multi-Q XT.
Sure.
So there's trade-offs there. I mean, honestly, if you can get to about $450 for an X3400 or 3500H, that's the one.
Yeah. Christian, just a bit of daydreaming here, but is there any chance that HDMI could ever carry power, a bit like how power over Ethernet works? Christian is just imagining how nice it would be if all you need to plug into the wall is either your TV or your receiver, and then that would act as a power hub for all the HDMI devices, so they truly only need one cable. What are our thoughts? My thought is that if I have to rely on HDMI for one more thing, I'm going to kill myself. It's like, in order for the power to work, you have to turn on CEC. No!
I mean, oddly, there's some little thing in the back of my mind that said there was something in HDMI 2.1 that, I mean, for sure the Ethernet channel is definitely being used, but I'm pretty sure that's all to do with CEC stuff.
Right.
I mean, the problem with trying to send power over HDMI is the leads in there are tiny.
It's
so skinny.
Everything is so tight.
Like unimaginably skinny wires are being... There's 19 pairs of wires inside of any HDMI cables. Think about how skinny they are. And trying to send power over that is a little bit nuts.
So like power over Ethernet is great, but it can only, it doesn't give you... It has to be very low power stuff. Yeah. Like itty bitty motors that are, turning blinds or controlling cameras, external cameras.
Yeah, it's the 5-volt stuff, the 5-volt DC stuff, right? Like, I mean, there is an HDMI plug that delivers power, which is the MHL plug. The MHL plug it looks exactly like an HDMI plug, but it's enough power to charge your phone while it's connected. But that's MHL to USB plug. It's not a HDMI to HDMI plug being meant to send power that way. So, I mean, I see where he's coming from. Of course, if you could reduce wires, that sounds good. But I just don't see it happening with HDMI because of just how skinny those teeny tiny little wires are.
Right. I mean, it could happen.
Anything
could happen. We'll see. But please no. Please, HDMI people.
I just want to see our houses become DC instead of everything being AC outlets, because there's no reason why we all shouldn't have some solar panels, and instead of converting it to AC and losing a bunch to inefficiency, you just have DC throughout your house and connect things DC directly. That's what I want.
All right. Infinite Gary. Gary's ears perked up when he heard that there will be a 48-inch OLED TVs coming out next year. He's got a spot in his house where that size will be just right, while the current 55-inch models are just a bit too large. But then we also mentioned Samsung's new transition in South Korea to manufacturing QD-OLED TVs, and Rob explaining how they use nothing but blue OLED subpixels plus red and green quantum dots as opposed to LG's OLEDs. They use nothing but white OLED subpixels plus color filters. Gary's thinking he'd prefer not to have that white subpixel that LG uses to boost maximum brightness at the expense of color saturation. So have we heard anything about how soon Samsung's QD OLEDs will be available and whether they'll be making them in the smaller 48-inch size? I don't think we have any clue.
No, I haven't heard any. They talked about converting their manufacturing lines over to it, which, I mean, that would mean they can't be tremendously far away from actually selling it. They're not going to convert all those lines, start manufacturing, and then not sell anything. So I'm thinking that probably in 2020 we'll start to, by the end of 2020, we'll probably start to see Samsung's
if they've started the conversion process, then I would expect in a calendar year you will start seeing. Because I mean that's just money they're wasting right now.
But I had no idea about whether they'll have the 48-inch size. I mean, the reason LG is able to make the 40-inch size is because they have their new plant that can pump out 77-inch OLEDs, and then the mother glass is just the right size to also get some 48-inch OLEDs out of that same mother glass, and that's kind of how the 48 inches came around. So I'm not sure what Samsung will be doing. They'll probably be starting with 55ers and 65ers. That is definitely my guess. But honestly, the thing is, Gary, on the newest OLEDs like the C9 and the E9 that are out right now from LG, they have the option to turn the white subpixel off and only use the red, green, blue subpixels. So there you go. You can already get it.
There we go. Things to worry about. Sony and Paramount announced they'll be releasing more IMAX Enhanced versions, both on physical Ultra HD Blu-rays and via streaming. And the entire world said, what? What's Ultra HD?
Yeah, let alone IMAX Enhanced, eh?
It's what? I'm so sad that we are in such a niche right now. Like, how did we get into this niche? We used to be mainstream.
Everybody who writes into this podcast talks about Atmos. We are the niche of the niche.
I mean, you know what? And I wanted to put a call out. I wanted to put a call out to people. I would give me the dumb questions that you're too afraid to ask anybody. Please. Okay. And I will tell you right now. But then
someone asks us about 5.1 Sonos and we tell them not to do it, so we're not helping ourselves.
Well, 5.1 Sonos is a waste of money. I mean, I'm sorry. You could do all that for so much less.
Get a receiver that can go up to Atmos. Ends up being our recommendation. It's our own fault, Tom.
Give me we'll make you anonymous, and that's fine. Just tell us, hey, I want to ask this question. I don't want you guys to mention my name. That's fine. All right. Give us all the base questions that you're like, the basic questions that you think you know, but you're not really sure, and you wish you could have somebody clarify, but you're afraid to ask. Tell us. We will not make fun of you, I promise. Because I am so sick of answering these.
I want someone to ask, like, why are there blue and green RCA jacks on the back of some AV receivers? Because who's used component video for years? There've got to be people who are getting their first AV receiver and have literally never seen component video, because why would they in this day and age?
Well, and what about, I'm waiting for somebody to say, how come there's brown ones back here? What is which brown cable do I buy?
That's right.
All right. Anyway, Sony and Paramount announced they'll be releasing more IMAX Enhanced versions of both physical Ultra HD Blu-rays and via streaming. Are these intended for the 500,000 plus full IMAX home theaters, or are they meant for normal rooms, since the press release talks about the flat panel TV models from Sony that are IMAX Enhanced? Is there some sort of minimum screen height needed in order to see these IMAX Enhanced titles as intended by filmmakers? It's so nothing. IMAX Enhanced is
it really is a big bag of nothing.
Nothing. It's DTS.
It's
HDR
DTS audio. Yeah, it's HDR10 Plus, which ironically Sony doesn't support, and they're the only brand who's brought out IMAX Enhanced TVs so far, but they don't do HDR10 Plus, and that's what IMAX Enhanced content uses.
It's maybe remastered. I mean, it's just supposedly so nothing.
Supposedly IMAX are the ones who remastered the video and sound for the release, but it is an Ultra HD Blue release. It is a 4K UHD streaming release. It's still 16:9. They didn't make it taller, like a full-size IMAX theater has that, odd aspect ratio that's even taller, right? They didn't do that. It's still 16:9. It's still DTS-X audio. If you turn on IMAX Enhanced because you have an AV receiver that does it, it'll turn off your bass management, so don't ever use it.
That's my favorite part. Who needs space management
no,
when you have
isn't-
IMAX Enhanced?
I know Gary's familiar with, IMAX Enhanced, how you can build a full IMAX theater in your house for it's now all the way down to only $500,000. It started at $3 million and they've got it all the way down to $500,000 now. But no, it's not meant for those. These are 16:9 Ultra HD Blu-ray discs like any others.
Get this podcast sponsored by IMAX, and you and I get IMAX theaters in our home theaters. They come out here and tear down the walls of this place.
I don't know. I don't want it. No bass management in IMAX.
I know. Well, don't worry. They're going to put full-range speakers in every location. Travis has a pair of Linsol KZ-AS10 in-ear monitors. Never heard of them. When he's using them in his phone, they have a dead silent noise floor and they sound great. So he wanted to use them with his PC for normal listening as well when he is gaming. But when he plugged them into the PC's onboard audio, there was static and a high-pitched whine.
Yep.
So he installed a Creative Sound Blaster Z sound card, and it was quieter, but still not great. He actually determined that the static and buzzing was happening because the sound card was touching the outer case of his PC. So we insulated that, and the worst of the noise was eliminated, but there's still an obvious and constant noise floor. So I'm trying to think of what that might be.
Little low-level hiss. Yeah.
So he decided to switch to an external USB sound card, and he got the Creative Sound Blaster X G5, but it's basically exactly the same as the Blaster Z internal card, meaning it performed the same, or that
it performed the same. Still had a little bit of a low-level hiss at all times. Noise floor.
So what does he need in order to get a silent noise floor and no noise when using his in-ear monitors with his PC? If his phone could do it, why can't his gaming computer? Because no one cares about sound.
Yeah, this is sadly not uncommon at all.
Yeah.
I mean, like on my computer, for my microphone and headphone connection, I use a USB dual pre by AVRant. It is not a silent noise floor. There is a little bit of a noise floor through my Shure in-ear monitors, which connected to my phone are dead silent. So I know exactly what he's coming from. And that's a USB, separate device. It's not an internal card. It's not touching anything. But just like your Creative USB external sound card, my AVRant Dual Pre draws its power from the USB port. And
that's just not
if there's
power.
any contaminated noise coming out of that PC, and it sounds like your PC inherently is kind of electronically noisy if its own internal headphone jack was that noisy.
I know, that sounds real bad.
It sounds real bad. So,
I mean, usually you'll plug into the headphone jack, and you'll hear that sort of hiss in the background, or if it's too close to the hard drive, a lot of times you'll hear the hard drive.
And that high-pitched whine comes into it, too, from that.
Yeah.
So I understand that. But the key here would be to get an external DAC that has its own power supply.
Right.
So the one I like to recommend these days, because it's not too expensive and it's really nicely performing and it's not a bunch of BS, are JDS Labs products. You would actually need two in their case because their little Atom headphone amplifier that I like so much, which has a dead silent noise floor in it and lots of power to drive anything. $100 for the Atom amp, but it is an amp preamp. It doesn't have any digital inputs. So they have their little OL DAC, which is another $100, so $200 total, but that gives you a USB DAC that has its own separate power supply. You would then feed its analog outputs to the little Atom amp. Now, you're saying, okay, two devices, and it sounds like, $200, which is more than the Creative Sound Blaster that he bought. But honestly, if you're looking at the AudioQuest Dragonfly that so many people recommend, it's $200, and it draws its power from the USB port. So I wouldn't.
So
really
I've got
go
with
for that.
the Emotiva Stealth.
Okay,
external.
But that's like $400.
I know. Well, I mean, I'm not giving them a better option. I'm just giving them another option. So that one has like two headphone jacks, and you can actually use it to feed speakers and everything else. So it's true. It's not a true amp. It's a preamp.
It is, with a headphone amplifier built into it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. It's very good. But at the same time, it's the same thing. You just it has to have its own power supply.
No, I like those JDS Labs products a lot. So
yeah,
I'll point you there.
Clara got an NVIDIA Shield that's connected to a Denon receiver, which is then connected to a TV. When the NVIDIA Shield is powered on, it seems to also turn the TV on automatically. How is it doing that? HDMI-CEC.
HDMI-CEC, but what I want to warn you is that if you just try to find the mention of HDMI-CEC in your TV receiver in NVIDIA Shield, you probably never will, because everybody gives it their own stupid little brand name.
And some of them don't even make any sense at all.
They really don't.
Like,
So
some of them don't even use the word control or HDMI or anything. They just call it some random thing, and you're like, what is this? Oh, turn it off. And
so HDMI-CEC is the overarching name. It's what HDMI themselves came up with. It stands for Consumer Electronics Control. That's the CEC. But in the NVIDIA Shield, the settings for that are under the HDMI section, and it actually gets very granular. In the NVIDIA Shield, it can say, when I turn my Shield on, also turn my TV on. So that's the one that Clara is talking about. But it also has, like, you can separate, okay, if I turn my TV off, should my Shield also turn off? Not necessarily. That's a separate setting. When I activate my NVIDIA Shield, should my AV receiver switch inputs? That's like an individual setting in the NVIDIA Shield. So it gets very granular in what HDMI CEC controls it can send. So by default, they're all turned on. So that's why you turn on your NVIDIA Shield and everything else in your system magically seems to power up, as long as they also have their HDMI CEC turned on.
Which means you need to go to all your devices and turn these things off, unless you like it.
Unless you like it, yeah.
In which case, knock yourself out. If you're just making sure that your NVIDIA Shield isn't, powered by Satan, and that's why it's doing this stuff.
You want to look for
it's supposed to do this.
Anything under the HDMI settings of all these devices that talks about control in any way. In your AV receivers, it's usually not too hard to find, but unfortunately, your TVs, like Sony calls it Bravia Sync, and Samsung calls it AnyNet Plus. Is that their one for it?
That's like that. Totally sounds like HDMI-CEC.
Right.
Doesn't sound at all like you're trying to connect to a network.
I think Vizio's is called Smart Control or something like that.
At least that one has the word control in it.
Makes sense. LG has a True something, whatever it is. They all have different names, but it'll be under the HDMI setting somewhere, and it'll talk about controlling other devices with the HDMI connection.
So, but again, if you like it, if it's working for you, this is something you can play with. I mean, we usually turn it all off because we use Harmony remotes, which turn everything.
Don't want one on command turning other things on when we're going to be sending that command from our Harmony remote in just a moment.
Right. But if you're not using that, if you're like, hey, if I just use my NVIDIA remote, suddenly everything else seems to work too. Is that normal? It can be, and you can use that. And the whole idea of it is so that you don't have to buy a Harmony remote.
Yeah.
We buy a Harmony remote because HDMI-CEC often creates other problems that are detrimental to our experience. So we'd rather turn it all off so that we can control with our Harmony remote, and then nothing else gets screwed up along the way. If this is working for you, then buy a lottery ticket. You're one of the lucky ones, because it screws up stuff for everybody else. So she asks, are we going to CEDIA? Anything we would recommend checking out at the CEDIA Expo? I would check out everything. Stay away from stay away from the porn dudes. There's always the porn dudes there. Those guys are creepy.
You're not going to CEDIA, right? I'm not going to CEDIA.
No, we can't. I can't. I mean, I could if somebody would pay for me to go, but I'm not going by myself. I mean, I'm sure I could figure out.
So we're not going in person. I prefer to just catch the news outside of it anyway, because if you actually physically go to CEDIA, you usually miss a whole bunch of stuff, and you have to catch up on it in the news later anyway. Yeah,
it is very. These days, it's almost easier to go. If I went to CEDIA, I would not do news. I would do like day recaps of, of like experiences that I had and sort of the things that most impressed me and that sort of thing. So, I mean, it's very, the hardest thing about these shows in general, first of all, don't go to Sony's booth because they suck. Sorry, Sony. They will not, if you do not have an appointment, they will not talk to you. It is really quite terrible. But a lot of these people will. And the thing is that it's not always obvious what is the hot thing. Like, it's so strange that you'll walk up and you'll see all these speakers and stuff, and they're like, oh yeah, plus we've got this new thing over here which is doing this thing that nobody really cares about, and you're like, oh my god, that's the most amazing thing I've ever heard of. Because you actually know what you're talking about. So don't be afraid to talk to people. this is CEDIA, and they are gearing towards professional installers and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But so there's two unfortunate realities: the porn guys, which are they have the VR porn experience, which they'll try to get it's really terrible. And then the booth babes, which are the other things I don't like about going to CEDIA, which they hire these girls to basically kind of draw guys in.
Sure.
The best of them that will actually study up and know things and be able to help you. But that aspect of it made me uncomfortable. But going there to each of the booths, and if there's a booth that seems interesting, or make sure you look around and see if there's some piece of tech that seems a little unassuming, and don't be afraid to ask questions because they're there to answer them. And there's lots of free stuff. Take a bag.
I would say, so we already know, I mean, usually what's shown at CEDIA is not tremendously different than what's shown at IFA. And we know that this is one of those years where there isn't a huge change happening in consumer displays. So don't expect to see something super exciting in consumer displays, either projectors or flat panels this year. Almost everything that's coming out was announced at CES. So, I mean, of course, if you're there, you're going to want to check out LG's crazy OLED display because they always have one, and they'll have their rolling OLED and their 88-inch 8K OLED, and those will be on display. But we already knew about those, although still cool to see in person. But check out Monoprice, because they've got some very interesting installation stuff coming out that should be coming out like any day now. Their 16-channel processor, their new in-wall THX certified speakers and that. So Monoprice could have some interesting stuff on display, and they'll probably have something that I have no idea is even coming out because they're always working on new stuff. So their new THX speakers, 16-channel processor, that could be fun to see.
I would do, because they do have speaker demonstrations there, and they will have rooms set up. RBH almost certainly will have one. They usually do. I would definitely check that out. I would talk to RBH. I would go to RBH no matter what. I mean, and because they're just great guys. And make sure whoever you talk to, you say, AVRant said it.
Yep.
Yep. Mention us as much as possible. Thank you. And you'll be our listener of the week. So yeah, mention this as much as possible. But SVS will almost certainly be there. They're not always there, but if they are, I would check them out.
I'll bet they will be this year.
See what's going on now that they're in stores and stuff too. So that probably makes a bit of a difference. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I would check out as many speaker manufacturers as I could, and get some demos in there. Oh, and sometimes they have things that are off.
Yeah, not in the main show floor. Yeah, so separate suites and stuff.
Yeah, so you're gonna want to kind of figure out what's going on with that, and then you can get like you go and you see the 100 million foot screen. That's essentially the size of an actual movie theater. With this big, self-contained, looks like an octopus with cooling things coming out of it. Wolf projector or whatever it is. Those are always fun to go to. They're never as good as I think they're going to be, but they're good. So generally speaking, when is the best time to buy home theater gear? Black Friday, after New Year's? Well, anytime they sell something on accessories for less is a good time to buy the gear because it doesn't always stay there.
Things do, like different product categories do tend to sort of come out at different times of the year, though.
Right.
So it's not, it's hard to say against all home theater gear. It'd be like, displays tend to be a one time a year, AV receivers at a different time of year. Yeah, I mean, Black Friday, of course, is a pretty good time in general, but I mean,
Cyber
also
Monday, nowadays it's like that whole week.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But also right before Super Bowl is another good time.
Right. You're going to see a lot of deals, especially on large flat panel displays during right before Super Bowl because of, they can push a lot of TVs during that time as people are getting ready for their parties.
Yeah. And new AV receivers are typically announced in October, November, and then don't become available until March, April. So for AV receivers, if you wait until late spring, early summer, that's when you can get excellent deals on last year's models because they're all being cleared out because the new ones are coming in around April time frame, typically for AV receivers.
Right.
Yeah. Speakers don't tend to change a tremendous amount because they'll often stay the same models for several years, and then when the brand new model comes out, you can't really predict that as an annual thing in speakers.
No, the speakers don't really do that. No. But what you can do is, set up Google alerts for things like that. That's what I would do. How are we doing on time here? I feel like
I think we can do one or two more. I mean, we've got 26 on the darn list, although some of them are shorter questions at least. But
all right, we'll do one for sure. We'll see.
Yeah.
John heard us say how we prefer to use game mode versus the various upmixing formats. He found that very interesting because he was under the impression that it didn't matter whether you press movie, music, or game. He thought they were all just repeats of the same listening modes. But are we saying they actually have different sound characteristics? What are those movie versus music versus game differences for Dolby Surround upmixer and DTS Neural X upmixer? He tried to find information online about it, but there's seemingly nothing written about it at all.
And he's not wrong. It was more common to find it, and it's sort of just carried through from the old ones back when it was Dolby Pro Logic and Pro Logic 2X and Pro Logic 2Z and DTS, Neo 6 and then Neo X. They wrote about it more back then, and it has sort of followed through, but nobody has recently written about it. You're right about that, John.
The game modes tend to be the ones, if you think about what people kind of sound they want for a video game, they want things that are as clear and as localizable as possible.
Yeah, like pinpoint and discrete. Yeah.
Right. So game modes tend to have the most discrete sound, if you will. You know, the stuff that's coming out of the speaker, isn't at all smeared or reverbed or anything like that.
Yeah, like if you're taking what was originally a 5.1 signal and upping it to 7.1 or upping it to 7.1.4 for Atmos or DTS Neural X upmixer, what it will tend to do is instead of like mushing together the side and back surrounds, it'll try and pick like one speaker to play a given sound out of, so you get a more pinpoint, precise, delineated, separated sound in the game mode.
Right. So, and the music, it's been so long I can't even remember. Is the music a little bit more? They try to make it sound a little bit fuller and.
Well, they almost always what they'll do is so like. If you were listening to the game mode and there's a sound that is right in between your front left and right speaker, the game mode will mix that into your center speaker and your center speaker alone. No sound will come out of your front left and right. It'll mix it right in there. But with the music mode, if there's a sound that's in the middle, it'll play it out of all three front speakers. It'll try to spread the front sound stage so that it's not just coming out of one individual speaker at the front. It kind of just spreads everything across the front in the music mode for the most part.
And what about movies?
Movie mode tends to add a little tiny bit of reverb in your surround channels. It tries to make it sound like a bigger room, which if you have that tiny little bit of reverb, you'll have the quote-unquote bigger room sound. But this is why when I'm talking about either adding a tiny little bit of reverb or smearing the front, that's why I like the game mode. I'm like, I'd rather just have sounds come out of individual speakers, please.
Well, and the reality here is, what we say or what we prefer. I mean, I've switched between these modes, and the differences are very minute to my ear. It's not a huge difference. I mean,
well, especially if the original signal was at least 5.1. Right. I hear more of a difference if I'm using an upmixer on a 2-channel recording. Then it's pretty apparent. It's quite apparent.
And I don't normally listen to 2-channel recordings in here, so that's part of. And when I do, I listen to them in 2-channel because I'm more of a purist. But you experiment. It's literally 3 button presses and just figure out what sounds best to you and then go with that.
Yeah, because if you're upmixing 7.1 to Atmos. Dolby Surround upmixer or DTS Neural X upmixer, if you're taking something that was originally 7.1 and doing that upmixing, you probably won't hear a huge difference between movie, music, and game because they already were discrete in the 7 bed layer channels, and the only thing being added is what's extracted and put in the overheads. So it does make a difference what you're starting with.
All right. Let's do one more, and then I got to go take care of this puppy.
All right.
Kev on Facebook. Kev would like to better understand how auto EQ room correction works. He has only owned Sony receivers, so he's only familiar with their auto setup. That does a setup, but it doesn't do room correction, does it? Did they have a room correction? I think
they have a very basic EQ in some of their models. Yeah.
All right. It did a typical thing of setting all the speakers to large, and after Kev learned a bit more about bass management, he manually set all the speakers to small and then started setting everything manually and not using the auto setup at all. Eventually, he settled on running the auto setup and letting it set distance and levels, but then manually setting the speaker sizes and possibly tweaking the EQ settings manually. That's exactly what we would have suggested that you do. He's interested in getting a U-Mic 1 and Room EQ Wizard to play around with, but he would like to have more background knowledge and a better understanding so he'll know what to look for in Room EQ Wizard and what to possibly change. Okay. So could we elaborate on what steps in auto setup, like what he has in the Sony receivers, is actually doing? Is it just testing each speaker individually and attempting to make each speaker as linear as possible from top to bottom? Or is it somehow figuring out the system as a whole and making adjustments to that so that the final results of all speakers playing together is linear? He'd like to know what steps someone would take if they were to doing this whole process manually. Well, honestly, nobody does it manually.
Well, I'm sure somebody does.
No, but the black box is what is happening to the speakers. Like you set the curve, and it, the RubyQ Wizards or Odyssey or whatever. Honestly, I'm going to suggest that instead of going the direction that you're going, which is a fine direction, mind you, and I think getting a UMIC 1 from Cross Spectrum Labs, all already calibrated from Herb, and RubyQ Wizard is a great thing to do. But just getting Odyssey of XT or higher would be a way of fixing this. What your Sony is doing mostly is just setting distance and levels. That's what it's doing.
Yeah, but doing a very basic based on one measurement position EQ as well. And that's actually kind of a problem. Yeah.
Right. So, that's what I would trust it to do. And that's what I would trust most.
Distances and levels, yes, I would trust it to do
distances and levels, I would trust any receiver to take care of that, no problem. That does not bother me. When we get into the room correction is where I start getting picky about it and who does it. Now, can you do this with Rim EQ Wizard and a UMIC 1? Absolutely.
Yeah, it's more involved to do it correctly than people often espouse, though.
Yeah, it's not just set the mic on your chair, run the computer thing, and then download that to the because he even talked about
DSP.
Getting a mini.
He didn't talk about getting a mini DSP yet.
Because in order to make that work, you need a mini DSP. So that would be that's another couple $100. Mm-hmm. And then you need an amp as well.
You need a separate amp if you're going to do it that way as well. Yeah, I mean, I want to go through the steps that it's doing in the auto setup so that he understands that, because that's mostly what he wanted to understand.
Okay, so go ahead.
So, I mean, in any system, whether it uses only one mic position or multiple, the very first measurement is the most important measurement, and you want to have your setup mic where the phantom center should end up being. That might not necessarily be your primary seat. Not everybody sits exactly where the phantom center image should be between your front, left, and right speakers, but it's very important that if it's one and only or first measurement mic position is where the phantom center ought to be. And from that very first measurement is how it determines through, so it plays its little sweep, its little chirp, weep, 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 little sounds that come out of each speaker. It determines from that the delay between when the signal was sent and when it arrived at the mic, and from that it can figure out the distance, and it will set the level because it's sending out a sound that should register as 75 decibels on that microphone, and it adjusts the trim level to make it so that is what happened. From there, the various auto setup programs might do things differently. If it's a very basic one like Sony's or like Onkyo's original Accu EQ, it just says, okay, I took the one measurement from each speaker individually. I'll try to equalize that. So it'll first say, how low does that speaker play until it is 3 decibels quieter than the average, and I'll call that its low end point. And if it's anywhere below 80 hertz, it'll say it's a large speaker. So unfortunately, it almost sets almost all normal speakers to large. And after it's done that and probably incorrectly set the bass management, then it'll say, okay, I'll try to equalize everything above that minus 3 decibel point to be linear. And as we know, as you move from seat to seat, you're not necessarily going to have the same response. So the more advanced systems that take multiple microphone measurements, they collect all the measurements, they take an average of that, and it's not necessarily a straight average. It's usually a weighted average with that first measurement counting for more than all the others. But they'll take an average of that and say, okay, well, we can't just try to completely linearize the first measurement position, because over here in these 2 other measurement positions, it was like the reverse curve, right? There was a dip at position 1, but then it was a hump at positions 4 and 5 or something like that.
Right.
So we can't just boost that hump, because then it'll make these other positions far too loud, and it sort of uses that average to make a better guess of how to equalize things. So if you were to do it all manually, you'd have to do all of those steps one at a time. You'd play your pink noise or chirp individually, so you'd probably set the distances with a tape measure because there's not really any other way to do it. You'd set the levels based on just playing pink noise and looking at an SPL meter. And then to equalize it, to do it right, you should take a multitude of measurements in a cluster, about a 2-foot bubble, right? But you take multitude of measurements within about a 2-foot bubble and come up with an average, and then send out the equalization of that average measurement to something like a mini DSP to equalize it. Right, so those are basically the steps that are going.
Would then have to sit between your receiver, which would now be acting as a preamp, and your amplifier, which would
have to be a separate amplifier.
So now you're buying a mic, the free software, whatever cabling and stuff that you would need. You're taking all this time. You need the mini DSP, and you need an amplifier for every single channel of your thing. So
it gets costly. Or you could buy a
Denon, or you could just go to accessories for less, and for $450 you get a Denon, and
with the highest level of Odyssey.
Yeah, and it does it all automatically with a $20 app that allows you to adjust it to your liking.
Yeah, but it is.
You decide.
So in a system like, let's say, Trinov, which is a $30,000 processor and up, a system like that is actually looking at a multitude of speakers, because Trinov has the ability to create phantom speakers anywhere in your room. Right. And in order to do that, it has to know all of the individual speakers and how they collectively work together to effectively create a phantom speaker. So there is such a thing as an automated process that looks at the totality of your system. But the ones in AV receivers that we're talking about, they are looking at individual speakers. They're not trying to equalize, say, your front left and your center together so that when they play together, they create linear sound. No, they are doing it one at a time. But the good systems are basing that off of multiple microphone measurements and using an average, not just one position.
All right, who we got left?
Lots and lots, but that's okay. We got Kevin R, Stefan B, Jason H. That one's kind of long, but the rest are okay. Ben F, Andrew L, Carlton B, John B, J A, John M, and Tom K. Woohoo!
That's a lot of J's. All right, we want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Tom, Paul, and Stefan for going to www.avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link.
Indeed. Thank you, Tom, Paul, Stefan. Yep, thank you.
And thank you to our 87 patrons over at patreon.com, including Josh, Bastian from Germany, and Justin.
Yeah, that's patreon.com/AVRant Podcast for anyone who'd like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. Thanks so much to our 87 patrons, including Josh, Bastian, and Justin.
And we want to thank Tu for offering some additional help for sorting out our website bandwidth issues. And then, Tu, I will be continuing to contact you as we are going forward. Right now, Clint's kind of out of town, and I'm just still trying to figure this out. So I got to give that guy my phone number and let's just talk. I think that would be just easier. And I want to thank Tom for mentioning us to SVS when he bought his PC 13 Ultra.
Yeah, congrats, Tom. I know you're enjoying that gigantic cylinder. And 2A, thank you very much for helping out yet again with those bandwidth issues.
Yeah, we appreciate it. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Antry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AV Rant.
Now go out and listen to something.